Hello and welcome to this OECD webinar to launch a new initiative to measure the skills and abilities of vocational students across the globe. I'm Duncan Crawford, an editor at OECD's Department for Education and Skills. Most people from the world of education are already familiar with the OECD's PISA tests, which assess the performance of 15-year-olds in maths, reading and science. Now, a new international assessment is being developed by the OECD to rate the skills of people doing vocational education and training, or VET for short. PISA-VET will assess the abilities of students who want to be electricians, car mechanics, nursing assistants, and work in other professions as well. At the heart of PISA-VET is a new framework, which will act as a roadmap for the assessment, and it's being launched today. We're going to have a panel discussion in a moment. Joining us on the panel, David Hoey, Chief Executive Officer from World Skills International, an organization that promotes skills and vocational education. Hani Rosenbaum, Executive Director at Business for OECD, or BIAC. Olga Mironenko-Stamfer, Vice President of International Relations at health and wellbeing company, the United Health Group. She's also Chair of the Health Committee at BIAC. And Marcus Schwertel, Director of Global Policy and the Strategy Team at technology company HP. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us. We will get to that panel discussion in a moment. First up, though, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, Yoshiki Takuechi, will give some opening remarks. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of the OECD, I am delighted to open this webinar marking the publication of PISA-VET Framework. The OECD stays at the forefront of new developments to help education system benefit from new technologies and new approaches. And the PISA, as I have said, is at the cutting edge of these new developments in terms of assessment technology and approaches, as well as content. Reflecting evolving labor market needs and policy priorities, the OECD has prepared a framework for a new initiative, expanding the coverage of PISA to focus on learners in vocational education and training programs. The new PISA-VET assessment will provide, for the first time, internationally comparative evidence on how students learn professional skills for some of our most important occupations. And this PISA-VET initiative is not just an OECD initiative. It's a global collaboration involving 13 participating countries, more than 100 national experts, social partners, representatives, international organizations, and others. And I would like to particularly highlight the contribution of World Skills to the initiative, and to thank David Hoey, the CEO of World Skills, for joining us today for this webinar today. Crucially, employers are taking center stage. It is self-evident that businesses have an important role to play as partners and employers for vocational programs. Employers' understanding of skills needs, their expectation of VET graduates, and their experience of training VET learners will provide crucial information to help the OECD design a relevant and credible assessment. And I am very pleased that representatives of two employers are with us today. Thank you to Marcus Schwertel, Director for HP's Global Policy and Strategy Team, and Olga Mironenko-Stamfer, Vice President, International Relations at the United Health Group, for joining us. And the OECD is, as always, partnering with the businesses, industry, and employers organizations engaged in VET to implement the initiative. The OECD's partnership with Business of OECD, BIAC, is crucial in this regard and vital to ensuring harmonious collaboration. And I am very pleased that Hani Rosenberg, Executive Director of Business at OECD, is with us today. So with these opening remarks, I declare that the PISA-VET framework is launched and wish you a very productive webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks. And thank you to everyone joining us in the audience today. I see there's people from Bangladesh, from the UK, from Portugal, Scotland, you name it, right around the world. So we do have an international audience, and we will get to our panel discussion in a moment. But now, Eliza Mahamadou's head of the OECD Centre for Skills, and she's going to highlight some of the key features about the PISA-VET framework, which of course has just been launched. Over to you.
Thank you, Duncan. Let me start by sharing my screen so that we can take you through. So it's really this very important day for us today. Let me just go through this. Okay, I hope you can all see it. And so just to confirm that you can see the screen, Duncan, all good?
Yes,
wonderful.
We can see it.
Great, thank you. So we have embarked at the OECD on the PISA-VET initiative because we have seen that VET has been a powerful lever for economic growth in some countries, but not in others. So why is that? We can't fully respond because we don't have, as of today, the possibility to compare the achievements of VET programs in one country with those in another. So as of today, we have some data on VET enrollments, qualifications, and labor market outcomes. And what PISA-VET intends to do is to compare skill levels in VET programs across countries. So this will allow policymakers to improve their initial VET programs by making them more relevant, inclusive, and attractive, and serving VET teachers with that knowledge as well. So this should, for employers, improve the alignment between education and employers and ultimately increase participation in VET, which is really what we want to do through this PISA-VET assessment. Analyzing differences in learner characteristics will also promote that participation and provide employers with data for optimization of planning and investments. And exploring VET programs features and context will allow policymakers to identify the characteristics of successful VET provision and efficient and effective skills assessment, and allow employers to also evaluate national vocational programs against international standards. So this is a complex initiative, and we're taking a gradual approach to its development. We started the development phase of the initiative last year, and we will continue in the next 2 years to develop the methodology and data analysis, particularly to gauge the feasibility and affordability of the proposed assessment. We then intend to move to a pilot phase until 2030 with a field trial and a survey in 10 to 15 countries. Should that phase be successful, we would be able to launch the large-scale assessment phase in 2030 with the instrument development for additional occupational areas, which we would have defined by then, and main surveys in the 15 to 25 countries in a 3 to 4 year cycle with the results of international comparisons. The framework we're launching today defines in detail the occupational areas, the employability skills we are aiming to assess, and already provides background questionnaires for students, teachers, institutions, and trainers, and the system level data. At this stage, we have focused on 5 occupational areas, so automotive technician, electrician, business and administration, healthcare nursing assistant, hotel receptionists. These were selected in consultation with a wide range of experts and based on selection criteria, which covered, among others, the importance of these areas in VET and the labor market, the adequate representation of both male and female learners, areas that comprise a student population that is large enough for us to be able to conduct the assessment, the prevalence of these areas across several countries as well, so that we can ensure the international comparison, and their importance in relation to the twin digital and green transition. In the framework, you will each time find the definition of the occupational area, the context, the capability, skills, and competences, as well as the knowledge content required to perform the defined processes involved in the occupation. And throughout, we have concentrated on students, apprentices, and trainers in the last 6 months of their initial VET programs. As an example, for automotive technicians, we start with the definition of the contest in a workshop and the knowledge content focusing on light vehicle systems. We look at the processes assessed here, which are an investigation and rectification skills, and which would then allow us to report on 3 proficiency levels based on a numeric scale. In addition to these occupational skills, and precisely for the intent to increase the attractiveness and mobility of VET students, we use existing OECD instruments to also measure in the framework the key transversal employability skills of literacy, problem solving, task performance, and collaboration. So given the practical and applied nature of VET, this cannot be a paper and pencil test of knowledge. With the help of ASCOT and WorldSkills International, we want to ensure that this assessment takes place in realistic workplace environments. Now, for this, we will have 3 assessment types: the knowledge assessment, an interactive simulation of workplace, and demonstration basis. With the collaboration of our partner countries and experts, we're confident that PISA-VET will allow us to compare the quality, equity, and efficiency in VET learning outcomes across countries. And with that, we would like to thank the many participating countries and as of today, and the international and national experts and international institutions partners, WorldSkills, who are accompanying us today in this ambitious initiative, as well as our social partners and TUAC with corporations, and BIAC, who is also here with us today. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and look forward to the panel discussion. Back to you, Duncan. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa, head of the OECD Centre for Skills there. If you are watching and you have any questions, then please do get involved. You can write your questions in using the chat function at the bottom of your screens. Send them in and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. Apologies in advance if I don't manage to do so. I think following that presentation, we have a pretty good idea of what the PISA-VET framework is, how it's going to work, and what it aims to do. But what do people in the world of education think about it? Well, let's bring in our panelists. I think it's about time. Why don't we start with David Hoey, Chief Executive Officer from WorldSkills International. Thanks so much for joining us, David. You've devoted a large portion of your career to promoting and assessing professional skills. In your view, what kind of difference will PISA-VET make?
Thank you, Duncan. I'd like to answer your question with 3 perspectives from our experience at WorldSkills. Firstly, our global experience and scale. WorldSkills International has assessed young people's vocational mastery in an authentic work environment for over 70 years. It's done this through global skills competitions hosted by one of our 87 member countries every 2 years. This coming September, we'll have 1,500 competitors under the age of 23 or 25 from across the world, competing in 62 skill competitions over 4 days in Lyon, in front of 250,000 visitors and hopefully millions more virtually. And in Lyon, our member countries and regions will come together to learn from each other, to benchmark their VET outcomes through challenging skills competitions, and to take home lessons for their national and regional VET systems. So thus, I guess WorldSkills and PISA-VET share the same goals and direction. And at the same time, since WorldSkills and the OECD are distinct in how they fulfill their goals, there is strong scope for mutual learning and a lasting partnership. Secondly, our focus on skills mastery and excellence. So we all recognize that there is a wide spectrum of perceptions about VET, who it's for, how it should look, be delivered. The WorldSkills competition assesses actual work readiness across a performance range of competence to excellence, following young people's initial VET programs. And to do this on a global scale requires us to understand and articulate each occupation's professional and transversal skills for work performance today and for transfer and progression tomorrow. Our progress and achievement in doing this can be measured by our strong partnerships with industry and business, long-term partnerships often associated with generous sponsorship that enables us every 2 years, in effect, to build more than 60 small workplaces within which to assess live performance with considerable validity. And the employer presence and real work settings are key to the integrity and credibility of our results. And then thirdly, a WorldSkills, I guess it's a WorldSkills mantra that the medal winners must be the best performers in the workplace. So although we give our members considerable feedback with which to review aspects of their VET systems, we're not equipped to offer the in-depth and wide-ranging analysis that will form part of OECD's future PISA-VET reports, and in this way further enrich our members and other systems' capability. But nevertheless, WorldSkills has complementary strengths to bring to the table, and through our industry and business perspective, we capture the heartbeat of work mastery by basing our assessments on relevance and realism. So as the OECD brings its more extensive and scientific approach to assessment to bear on the outcomes of VET systems, we hope to gain from that while being a strong advocate of authenticity, not least through the wisdom of our hundreds of expert assessors who work with and inside the workplace. So I guess in summary, with regard to our partnership with PISA-VET as a significant, we regard our partnership with PISA-VET as a significant opportunity to bring together both contrasting and complementary expertise to serve our common goals and direction.
Thank you, David. A very quick follow-up, if I may. I'm thinking about the challenges here. Is it harder to assess the quality of vocational skills than skills in the traditional PISA test, for example, such as maths and reading?
Definitely, because VET's singular purpose is to get people workforce ready, and it's about demonstration rather than academic answering questions, etc. So you've got to bring in that real world demonstration of competence.
Thank you so much for that. Let's bring in Hanny Rosenbaum, Executive Director of BIAC. Thank you as well for joining us. BIAC is partnering with the OECD to get employers involved in the PISA-VET initiative. What's in it for the employers? Why should they get involved?
Thank you very much, Duncan. And there's a lot in for employers. But let me first of all thank you for involving us as a network partner, and special thanks to Mr. Takeuchi for underlining the important roles of employers in this debate. Now, I'd just like to mention that as business at OECD, we look at the broad spectrum of OECD activities, but let me assure you that addressing skills and labor shortages is really one of our priorities. Just like to refer to our brand new economic survey, which will come out in a couple of days, which underlines that 90% of our members are concerned or very concerned about labor shortages. And in this respect, I mean, VET, having high quality VET projects, it's crucially important because they provide for tailored skills development. So we are very pleased to partner with the OECD, and let me thank the OECD again for involving us, because what we would like to do is to bring as many employers to the table, because we believe it's crucially important that the point of view of companies, of employers' organizations is duly considered from the very start, from the design phase, but also up to the implementation. Now, your question, what employers can get out of it, I mean, a lot. Employers can get a lot out of it. I mean, first of all, we believe the project can be really important in helping identify best practices, and we need to share best practices so that systems can learn from each other. The project can also play a crucial role in providing incentives to improve VET programs and also ensure that resources are correctly used and that they're well targeted. And we also believe that the project should highlight the importance of partnership and cooperation with the private sector so that VET programs can really address the concrete needs of the labor markets. I'd just like to make two general comments. One is really to underline that VET systems are different from country to country. They are different from sector to sector. So there are, of course, certain challenges with regard to comparability, which need to be addressed. And then, as we heard, the project will need to strike a balance between the general professional skills on the one hand and the job-specific skills on the other hand. And for this, from the BIAC side, we believe it's crucially important that there are also practical live performance tests that can be included in the assessment. But in summary, just like to note again that we really look to the results of the OECD project to highlight good practice and evidence for improving VET systems, strengthen the relationship with employers, and also very important, raise the visibility of and attractiveness of VET programs, including for apprenticeships, where we see actually there's still many open positions that cannot be filled. So we hope that the outcome of this project will also show to young people that engaging in VET, engaging in apprenticeships can be a very valuable career path.
Thank you for that, Hanny. A quick follow-up. You mentioned that 90% of members, you said, were concerned about labour shortages. Could you expand on that? What are the reasons? Is it partly due to lack of people? Is it due to lack of qualified people? What are the reasons?
It's both. It's on the one hand, it's a lack of people. I mean, people don't apply. And this is something which is true for across sectors. It's not just for like hotels and IT, it's really true for across sectors. And then the second point is a skills mismatch. So we, from the BX side, we always underline, we have to increase participation in the labor market, and we have to make sure that the skills that are provided actually match the positions that are open.
Thank you.
But it was really the point number one that was highlighted by our member.
Good to know. Thank you for sharing that with us. Marcus Schwertel from HP, let's bring you in if you don't mind. Your company's in the tech field, obviously a big employer. And given how fast technology changes, have the main skills that HP looks for when recruiting computer programmers or whatever it is, for example, has that changed a lot as well?
It has changed a lot. And the issue we are facing, and this is totally aligned with what Hani just shared, we have an issue in finding the right qualified workers but it's really different from country to country. So when you think of what are the top areas that we are looking for from a skills perspective, it's not necessarily about what is the mechanical thing that people learn. We assume that when you went through a decent education, you know how to get your stuff done. So when you look at the top areas that we are looking for, it's candidates should have a growth mindset. So not being just fulfilled with this is where I am, but looking into how can I grow myself and my skills. They have to be, number two, agile. In the sense of just because you landed a job in this situation doesn't mean that that job stays for the rest of your career. Number three is effective communication. So how can you really communicate with your team, within your team, with your peers, with customers? And one element of that, and that is something we as a multinational company intensively look for, is there is the need to speak English and to communicate with your colleagues in English globally. Number four is results orientation. So get the stuff done. And number five is a learning flexibility, meaning, yes, you entered the company via a specific trade skill, but that doesn't mean that you stop there. We have a few more elements that we consider being relevant over there. But then learning and job readiness does not stop when you landed the job. It then starts again.
Thank you for that, Mark. I thought it's really interesting what you're saying there. From what you've seen then, when you're talking about growth, mindset, agility, communication skills, and so on, do you think PISA-VET's going to cover those skills adequately?
To be seen. So this is the launch of it, and I think that will be the challenge. And David mentioned at the beginning already that it is far more difficult in the PISA-VET environment to assess the skills compared to the well-known PISA study. So therefore, I'm confident that bringing all the great minds together, what Elisa shared at the very beginning, leads to a decent platform. And still, personally, have to admit that I'm still skeptical to see how that could be assessed, but to be seen.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let's turn to Olga Mironenko-Stamp from the United Health Group. Thank you so much for joining us as well. Your company is one of the biggest employers of healthcare workers around the world. Healthcare is going through a massive transformation at the moment. What's important to you in this framework? What needs to be kept front of mind?
Well, thank you so much, Duncan. And first of all, I would like to applaud this initiative. Healthcare workforce is a very guilt-based organization. It's a very complex organization. And I think standardization of skills for the base level, for the entry-level position as a healthcare assistant and a nursing assistant is an important first step in removing some of this complexity and potentially transforming health system approach as well. It will obviously empower the employees who will may want to seek employment in other countries. They will not need to go to the very costly and time-consuming process of being reaccredited and proving their credentials. It also gives certainty for a company like ours, for employers, because there is this global war for talent and there is a global shortage of workforce, healthcare workforce as well. So having access to a broader talent pool and being able to make sure that these people can enter the labor market immediately without jumping through further hoops if their education is different from the country requirements for the health profession where they choose to operate. But also setting those standards that will be the same for developed and developing countries will reduce the health disparities between different countries. And I think from the healthcare perspective, that's a very important angle. So overall, having this standardized, harmonized approach will remove some of the complexity and remove some of the stress from the very overstretched system. But the thing that excites me most really in the whole thing is, in this initiative, is the potential it has to shape the workforce of the future. Just think about it. This is a 10-year project. So the program will go full scale in 2034 onwards. Think how healthcare has changed in the last 10 years. It has been transformed by so many factors. And if you just think about the megatrends that are shaping it, aging population, nursing assistants, the people whom you will be training or whose skills you will be assessing, they'll be very often the frontline, the main frontline workers who will work with old, frail people with complex needs. So there is an angle here. We'll need more of those people. But doctors and nurses get old too, and there is a global shortage of workers, as I've mentioned. There is a burnout, few people enter the profession. That means that throughout the hierarchy of healthcare workforce, people need to perform at the top of their license. And making sure that the healthcare nursing assistant who enter the workforce, they can take off some of the more mundane administrative tasks that are now being performed, let's say by a registered nurse, will free up the time for these more qualified professionals to do more complex tasks. So there is this additional angle. And finally, one thing that is really very important that everyone is facing now is the mental health crisis. And that is something where we do not have an answer. We're developing solutions to it as we go, strategies and developing workforce, because there is just not enough mental health professionals. So whatever the framework will assess, it will need to make sure that these nursing assistants will have at least some baseline skills to some cognitive therapy skills or ability to understand if the person with whom they're dealing is at a low point, and they need to be escalated up the system to ensure that they're dealt with properly. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all these things is because it may be different from other areas, skills areas, I don't know, but we don't really have a playbook where, well, this is the best practice for nursing assistant, and we'll just translate it into an international assessment. Some of these things are quite fluid. So the team who is developing this assessment will have to work hand in hand with the OECD Secretariat and the Health Committee, with industry, with health ministers who are looking at changing the scope of work. So making sure that the assessment that is being developed is actually fit for purpose in 10 and 20 years' time, addressing all these needs of this changing society that I've mentioned.
So do you think the skills requirements to become a nurse, for example, as you mentioned, nursing, are going to change significantly over the next 10 to 20 years? Because presumably, you know, caring, compassion, understanding the needs of patients, those kinds of things aren't going to change. So what are the top skills you think are going to be required to be a nursing assistant, for example, in the years to come?
Well, a lot of the skills will not change because you still need to have the baseline, but things that perhaps will need an additional piece. And by the way, I want to commend the team who developed that on the emphasis on the employability skills. To me, these are the most important things. The substance, how do you deliver the tasks in the profession may change, but the behavioral competencies, judgment, empathy, emotional intelligence, decision-making, these are the things that will determine whether the person will be able to survive and evolve in the changing healthcare profession or whatever they choose to do or not. Another important factor is the digital transformation of healthcare. Consumers now have all the fancy devices that look at their glucose, continuous glucose monitoring, or some blood pressure. So some of those tasks will not need to be performed by the healthcare assistant. However, what they will need to do is to be able to make a decision, navigate the person through the healthcare system. So it is more about the personality. And I think Marcus has mentioned this growth mindset. It's not a buzzword. It really is being a professional who can grow throughout and adjust to the very complex, evolving set of needs, and being able to take the responsibility that maybe 10 years ago only a registered professional could do. But now, both because of the changing situation and the hierarchy, another thing that will need to be considered is where this job sits in the hierarchy of other jobs, so that people do not overlap. And as I said, they play at the top of their license. The advances in generative AI now equip people that they can have a co-pilot, so to speak. They can go to see a patient, and within a few prompts, they can perhaps identify the best course of action, the best next step. But again, for that, you need to be competent, you need to be literate, you need to have basic digital skills. And I think that is the sweet spot. You can teach people the substance of the job, but it's the learning and the kind of ability to acquire knowledge that's really important. And I don't know how you'll be judging it. It'll be really interesting to see how you will assess it in a 3-hour session.
Thank you so much for that answer there, Olga. I saw some other members of the panel nodding along at times. We have had some questions coming in. And I'm going to turn to David for this one, because I think you're possibly the best one to answer. It's a question from Abdul Salam, who talks about difficulties of carrying out tests to assess vocational skills. And he asks, how can you balance between assessing the knowledge and the mastery of the skills?
Yes, that's what we've dedicated our existence, our brand to, is what's the difference between competence, which is in a world of VET, you're either not yet competent or you're competent, but the real performance benefit to an employer or a community or a country will come from the difference between competence and excellence. And so we turn to industry, we turn to the employers, and we ask, what do you believe are the best and the most relevant competencies that a young person should demonstrate at the level of mastery? And then we integrate that into a way in which they have to demonstrate it rather than just know it. And that's where, a skills competition is all about hands-on demonstration of excellence. And that is going to be one of the challenges of scaling up into a PISA-VET program.
Thank you so much for that. There is a question for you, Marcus, which has been sent in by a member of the audience from Rodion Kolsheko, asking about hard skills, because in your answer, he says you mentioned mostly soft skills. Do you estimate candidates across other skills other than the ones you mentioned, he asks?
Yeah, so I'm always struggling with the soft skills versus hard skills thing, specifically in the vocational perspective. I think it should be pretty straightforward what the hard skills are, because that's that area you went through. And when we have, as a company, job openings in a specific field for a specific VET-oriented job, this is the given that you master that. So therefore, we really focus on the other elements that David already described as the competency. So we have a few more things that we look at, but again, this is not really the hard skill, because the so-called hard skill is in the job description as something that we look for. I like the way what Elisa mentioned earlier, to talk about employability skills, and that moves away from this, here's the hard skill, there's the soft skill, and here are the employability skills. And this is something where some more elements come into play. For us as a company, that's, for example, digital fluency. As no matter what your job orientation is, digital fluency is a must. Customer centricity, teamwork, and again, as a multinational company, cross-cultural and cross-functional collaboration. These are other key elements that people might call soft skills. I don't.
Thank you for that answer. We've discussed, as we've been hearing, some of the top vocational skills that students should acquire. So let's now move on in this discussion and take a look at how to measure these skills and to internationally compare results. Let's bring in Hani Rosenbaum from BIAC. Hani, where do you see skills or knowledge gaps between what employers are looking for and what new employees with VET qualifications actually have?
Yeah, thank you for that question. First of all, I mean, VET systems are, of course, more practical and targeted, but nevertheless, I mean, skills gaps, I mean, still do exist. As I mentioned before, I mean, VET systems do vary from country to country and sector to sector, so that also applies for the challenges and skills gaps that they are facing. But let me just highlight like a few overarching points. And one issue is that VET programs do not always keep track and like keep up with the latest technological developments. And that is something which is actually important for almost all sectors. So we strongly believe that VET programs must be agile and they must take new technological developments into account more quickly. Digital skills were raised a couple of points. I mean, these are, of course, particularly important to employers. And it's not just relevant for IT sectors. I mean, Olga mentioned how important digital skills will be for the health sector. So VET programs should increasingly reflect these digital skills and also focus how they're used in the specific respective sector. Another point that or challenge that employers often mention is limited practical hands-on experience of candidates. So of course, apprenticeship programs do include time in the company, but often it's not sufficiently long. I mean, the time in the company should allow the students to see through processes from the very beginning to the end, which is not always the case. So to make this as practical as possible. And I'd also like to add a word on teachers. I mean, teachers should, if possible, come from the sector that they're teaching on, again, to make the teaching as practical as possible. Now, let me underline the importance of basic literacy skills as well. I mean, this is not so much something which is of direct relevance to VET programs, but the basic literacy skills are important to acquire all other skills. So while this is not the main responsibility of VET programs, it is important maybe to have special programs in place when needed to allow certain students to catch up. And then in terms of soft skills, I mean, this is mentioned again, like the balance between hard skills and soft skills. This is really becoming increasingly important for employers. I mean, let me mention communication skills, problem solving, adaptability, and good work ethics, which we really need in every single job. And those issues should be given additional attention in VET programs. Now, I'd also like to mention in closing that as workplaces are often becoming more international, they're becoming more diverse, employers also need employees who are comfortable with working in these diverse work environments, and we have to see how this can be reflected in VET programs as well.
Thank you for that. Let's turn to Olga Mironenko-Stamp from the United Health Group. Olga, you talked about the professional skills of nursing assistants earlier on. Which of these skills are lacking relevant metrics, and how would you like PISA-VET to go about addressing those data gaps?
Thank you. Well, as I've mentioned before, to me, the areas where there is not many metrics, just because there is currently few syllabi worldwide, is the area of mental health and behavioral health. I think that's one of the areas where PISA-VET can add additional substance. But again, because it's so fluid, because all the strategies are being developed now and how you attract people into the healthcare and care sector to deal with mental health issues, this is quite fluid. So it will be done in collaboration with the health bodies, health trade bodies, and health ministers, as well as companies, to identify and to build up the appropriate metrics for assessing the skill. But first of all, understanding what will be the right baseline for what should the nursing assistant be able to do, what would be their tasks, and how to bring the person appropriately through the system to address this mental health skills. So that is the challenge of this. There is no existing playbook where you can just cut and paste things and put them into the framework now. And the second thing is digital skills. And here we have to be mindful of different levels of digital maturity of health systems, because if we're talking about international comparison, then it has to be something that's relevant for different countries with different levels of investment and different even cultural mindset about how digital can and cannot be used. So I think that's another area that will be developing at a huge speed. And as the program develops over 10 years, it needs to keep pace with advances in digital to make sure that it doesn't play catch up, but constantly, but the workers are equipped with the base level of skills that will allow them then to benefit from the technological advances. But there must be a basic level of digital literacy.
Thank you for that, Olga. And outlining a number of challenges there again. David Hoey from World Skills International, let's get your perspective on this again. On the basis of your experience with the World Skills competitions, as you mentioned, the next one coming up in Lyon, are there particular skills where it's easier to make international comparisons than others?
That's a very good question for this discussion, because VET is hugely diverse and every VET system is different. With 87 countries, we get to look at all of those. And for benchmarking to have any value, one must agree on a set of knowledge, skills, and behaviors that define each occupation, together with the transversal skills and a robust assessment framework. And these are that bedrock of benchmarking. Putting that in place for our skills competitions has been a mammoth effort, especially over the last decade. And today, we hope that PISA's framework will further advance the search for global reference points to aid access and mobility. And once this framework is in place, benchmarking has value for many reasons, because benchmarking can monitor and accelerate responses to new regulations, materials, and techniques. And so clearly the skills or occupations most affected by digitalization, automation, climate change would be priorities. Construction and engineering skill competitions, which account for over 1/3 of our competitions, are examples. Where there are ISO standards, global companies, and international regulations, benchmarking is less complex than for occupations with strong cultural influence. And these occupations, the ones with strong cultural influence, must be a priority for benchmarking, because quality is likely to vary widely and judgments to be contested. Here, the assessment process and the judgments are much more complex because they are inherently human. And examples of these occupations with a range of personal services, including healthcare and hospitality. So irrespective of the occupation or sector, our constant priority for benchmarking is and will be for the transversal skills. We have 4 mandatory transversal skills, which together account for at least 20% of our assessment. Strong performance in applied transversal skills, especially when gained in the workplace, is a direct indicator of VET quality. Work organization, communication and ICT, problem solving, creativity and innovation, and not least sustainable practice are all mandatory. So in conclusion of your question there, although our World Skills competition is itself a benchmarking event with winners and rankings, the dominant identity of World Skills is an inclusive community, a movement. And we hope and assume that a PISA-VET comparative assessments will form part of a progressive strategy within which every system will be provided signposts upwards and given handholds on the way for them.
Thank you for that answer. Marcus Schwertel from HP, your answer earlier on about soft skills has elicited quite a reaction on the chat from some people. And I just want to put to a point made by an Esther Winther, who writes, it's clear from studies and in the workplace that there are deficits in soft skills, but a sensible way to compensate for this, she writes, is to acquire specific workplace hard skills. They're the relevant predictor of work-orientated behavior and performance in jobs. And I just wondered if you'd like to reflect on that comment.
No disagreement at all. So, and staying in with the TVET lens over here. So, when you start your job after a vocational education and training program, and you acquire additional skills, how to navigate complex environments, so-called soft skills or other employability skills, you will still learn on what your profession is. And this is something that even in jobs that are not necessarily in the IT world, you will continue learning the hard skills, and I really have to work on finding a better terminology for myself to how to distinguish them. So no disagreement. In order to do that properly, I think it is important that you have these other skills to be open to have this growth mindset. Again, there it is. It's really not just about buzzword, because this helps to grow your overall skill set and to stay competitive. An interesting thing, I don't know at how many education discussions I took place, this conversation so far never mentioned the one buzzword that is prevalent in the industry where I'm in, and we have not spoken about AI yet, so I'm saying it, which is interesting, because I think AI will also impact the way how the TVET system will work in the future. And I'm curious how AI will play a role in these hard and soft skills differentiations. I have no answer to that yet, but I'm observing it carefully, and the rapid pace, at least in the IT industry, that this is evolving, I've never seen anything like that before. So this is not just a hype wave. It is something profoundly changing the way how we work. So curious how this will go and how that transpires into assessment systems in general.
Thank you for that answer, Marcus. Is there anyone on the panel wants to respond to Marcus about that regarding the potential impact of AI and how that might change the skills required for vocational students in the near or long-term future? David Hoey.
Yeah, I would just add that I'm like Marcus. There's never been anything like this in terms of, is it progression? Is it disruption? We're not sure yet, but certainly the integration of technology into a vet worker's tools, and then obviously how to assess it is critical. Olga mentioned it before. The competence level is rising because the tools and the technologies are providing a lot of the fundamental pieces. And so I guess assessment has to, because you've got the demand in the workplace, and then you've got to have vet keeping up with that. And then you've got to have a way to do comparative assessment. So it's early days, but everyone is talking about how will it be integrated and how will it be assessed. We don't have the answers now, but we've got to have it on our radar very strongly.
Thank you for that answer, David. We are getting quite a few questions in on the chat, and I'm going to try and whiz through some of them as quickly as possible. And Hanny Rosenbaum, just to give you a heads up, this one probably is best directed at you. It's a question from Rachel Whitney Smith, who writes, she's interested to know if the panel believe there's been an increase in STEM skills and competencies required by employers in the VET sector. And is this a potential barrier for some choosing particular VET pathways, adding to the current skills shortage? You spoke about skills shortages earlier on, Hanny. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is an increase in STEM skills that is required. I mean, of course, it depends on the sectors, but in general, STEM skills is something that we very, very actively support from early education up to VET, to university level education. Whether it's a barrier, I mean, of course, it's always a barrier, like, digital skills are easier to acquire by some than by others. I mean, we just mentioned AI. Let me just add on AI. This really addresses everything from jobs, education, assessment, and we look to the OECD to give us some of the answers. And we'd also like to make sure that PISA-VET takes this into account, because it will evolve over the next couple of years very quickly. So on STEM skills, yes, we very much appreciate an additional focus at all levels in STEM skills, but of course the degree to which it will impact different VETs will vary.
Thank you for that, Hanny. Olga, do you have any reflections on that in terms of STEM skills requirements? Are they going to increase for vocational students in for the healthcare sector?
I think so. And I think as I've mentioned, it's being able to operate with all the latest tools available as they evolve. It's not only the things that you're taught at school, whatever it is, 2 or 3 years of training that you get to become nursing assistant. But as technology changes and as some of more and more tasks are then being passed from, let's say, a registered nurse to the nursing assistant, they need to be able to take it on board. And when we say STEM, it's not only, oh, the person is good at mathematics. Ultimately, we're talking about things like critical thinking and abstract thinking and being able to apply the logic that you've learned and pattern recognition. So it's a much broader, it's not about specific skills that you do to learn to pass a maths test, but it's rather your ability to continue adapting to the situation. I feel that I'm repeating the same message, but to me, the PISA-VET framework will only work if it assesses, if it throughout its development reflects the fact that jobs are changing because of AI and technological advances and shifts in the society, and it kind of has this growth room in the way the test is designed. So it can either add additional modules or it tests things in a sophisticated way that is not testing a very specific skill, but rather those broader behavioral competencies. That is probably harder because people can kind of tick the right box because if they think that that's what's expected from them. But whether that is really the way they will behave in a live situation, a stress situation, David, you discussed before how you will create this kind of almost live experiences and simulations. I think that would be an interesting piece. And I was also reading through the chat that there's quite a few comments about closing the gap with developing countries. And to me, that's a really important piece. I think, especially for healthcare, which is very often viewed as in many countries, and rightly so, is viewed as a very prestigious profession. And standardizing this framework for this entry-level healthcare profession, which sometimes in many countries does not require a medical school, it basically may create an additional pathway for people to a profession, to the field that they could have considered that it's out of their reach because you know, the mindset is that medical schools cost a lot and et cetera, but the fact that there is this baseline and they can enter into this profession at the nursing assistant level and then continue their growth throughout the profession. I think that's really important in reducing some of the, in improving some of the social mobility as well, by kind of setting this bar for people to enter into the healthcare profession.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts there, Olga. And I'm sorry to say we are running close to the end of time, so I'm not going to be able to get through any more of the questions on the chat, but thank you to everyone for sending them in. Before we go, let's get some final thoughts from members of our panel. If there's one takeaway for the people listening to remember to act on, and many of these people watching today are involved in the PISA-VET project, what would you like them to focus on to ensure PISA-VET achieves its aims? David Hoey, why don't we start with you?
Look, I think for us, our success has been built on, and our growth as around providing, firstly, promoting to young people a career in the skills, trades and technologies is a very good first choice career option. And secondly, a benchmarking of excellence for the member countries. So I would just encourage everyone, let's give it a go. At its best, VET is distinct, a developmental partnership between the learner, the teacher and the employer or business. To be credible and useful to the VET sector, the outcomes of PISA-VET need to be compared on their own terms. And this means that validity and relevance are paramount features of comparative assessment, despite the operational challenges that may be present.
Thank you so much for those final thoughts, David. Hanny Rosenbaum, let's go to you. What would you like people to focus on to ensure PISA-VET achieves its objectives?
Okay, great. If I may, I would just add 3 points. I mean, one is, as I mentioned upfront, the importance of close partnership with the private sector, with business organizations, also with companies, to really inform the discussions with first-hand experience. Second point, I think, which also became clear during the discussions, I mean, there are certain challenges in measuring certain skills. So I would call upon the OECD to keep an open mind, look at methodologies. They might change over the years, but just keep this open mind. And a third point, which is like really crucially important for us in BIAC, is that the ultimate result of the initiative can help raise the attractiveness of VET.
Thank you so much, Hani. Marcus Fertel, over to you. Your final thoughts, please.
Talk about it. So make sure that it's known, that people know what it is, how it works, that it's working, so that assessments are always something where folks might be scared about. So make it something that people are proud of being part. Make people proud of being part of the VET system. And therefore, this is not just an assessment thing, it is a communication campaign.
Really interesting, Marcus. Thank you for sharing that. And Olga Mironenko-Stamper from the United Health Group, your final thoughts, please, on what you think the focus should be to ensure PISA-VET achieves its objectives.
I will echo some of the key themes that we heard throughout this discussion today from different participants. It's collaboration with all the stakeholders in the system, especially given the evolution of some of the professional skills and the broader context. So making sure that it is devised, the framework is developed not in isolation just by the educational professionals, but constantly takes input from different parts of the system and is able to adapt to the changing needs. And the second piece is this adaptability and being able, not being a rigid system, but being able to respond to the requirements and on the professions and therefore on the skills that need to be assessed.
Thank you so much for that, Olga, and to all the other panelists as well. Thank you for your insights and for your time. And thank you, of course, to the audience joining as well. If you want to learn more about some of the things which we've been discussing, I can see that in the chat right now, you can check out the presentation from earlier on today. There is a link in the chat. You can also subscribe to the OECD's teacher newsletter to learn all the latest about the world of education. And you can also access the PISA Vocational Education and Training Assessment and Analytical Framework, what we've been talking about. The link is there in the chat as well. So thank you again for everyone who joined us. Thank you to David Hoey from World Skills International. Thank you to Hani Rosenbaum from Business at OECD, Olga Mironenko-Stamper from the United Health Group, and also, of course, thank you, last but not least, to Marcus Fertel from HP. Thanks to the production team for all their work which goes on behind the scenes. It's a lot harder than you might expect, having to deal with me at least. And to all those of you, of course, who joined the webinar today, thank you again. That's it from us. Please do join us for another webinar soon. All the best.